Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
And welcome to Today's Issues. No, I'm not Tim Wildman. I'm Ed Vitagliano, sitting in for Tim Wildman. He'll be back in the captain's chair tomorrow, flying the USS Enterprise on a 5-year mission, boldly going where no man has gone before. How about that? Wesley Wildman, good morning.
Good morning. I'm just glad to be on your right hand today. I'm your right-hand man.
You're my right-hand man today.
I got you today, Ed.
And Fred
will
Jackson.
not save you.
Yes, listen, I need saving.
Fred? Yeah, far to the left.
far to the left. And Alex McFarland also joins us today. Good morning to you, Alex. Where are you phoning in from or comrexing in from?
I am in North Carolina at my office at Southside Baptist Church. I'm not on staff here, but they graciously give me office space and a studio that we've built where we do Exploring the Word live 5 days a week. But I love what you said, riffing on the Star Trek intro, boldly going. Today's issues, boldly going where mainstream media really doesn't always go.
Hey, I like that.
Something
we could probably spoof that. Get some kind of music that's similar but not exact to the old Star Trek shows, so we don't get sued.
Yeah, that's right.
And we could
surprise
spoof.
Dad with it.
Truth, the final frontier.
Man,
as an intro.
Listen, I'm loving it. Truth, the final frontier. And then we could, every once in a while, Fred can say, Ed, I'm a doctor, not a plumber.
She's breaking up, sir.
Yes, Wesley could say, I'm not sure how much she can take.
I'm not good with accents or impersonation.
Well,
I would have to use AI.
It's all inside baseball when it comes to the old Star Trek show.
I think we're showing our age, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I show it more and more. And you know what? I've reached the age, Alex, where I don't care. I don't care if I'm showing my age. There was a time there in the 40s and 50s when I was in my 40s and 50s where I didn't want anyone to think that I was old. Now, listen, when I check out at a restaurant, my wife and I, and the young lady behind the counter says, I've already given you your senior discount, sir, without me asking, I'm good with that.
It's demoralizing, isn't it?
Well, it was for a while. Now it's not. But
take advantage of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Alex, anyway, thank you for joining us. And the church, I'm sure, is blessed to have you there. I'm sure you do a little bit of preaching every once in a while to kind of pay for your lodgings.
Rent.
Yeah, pay rent.
Yeah, they are so gracious, Pastor Howard McNeil. I'm in what was at one time the choir room, and they've allowed me to set up all this gear, and we do lots and lots of AFR radio from the studio that they give us.
You kick the choir out? Wow.
Yeah, hey, we're like, folks, we're taking over. But
move your robes.
There's a lot in the news, and I know you're flying the plane today, Ed, so I don't want to take over here, but I feel privileged. Whenever I get to be on Today's Issues, it's a great honor.
Well, listen, we're just glad you were able to join with us. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to be here, but I felt better, so decided to come on in. And but I always love having Alex on because you bring so much to the program. But you're right, there is a lot going on. It is Monday, December 9th. Fred, little bit of news overseas.
Yeah, as if the Middle East did not have enough in the way of a crisis right now going on the weekend. And it's actually started to brew last week in Syria as we heard of rebels coming in on the eastern border of Syria. Over the weekend, the Syrian leader, Bashar Assad, fled to Moscow as those rebels headed toward the Syrian capital of Damascus. And basically these rebels, and we'll talk about what constitutes the rebels in Syria a little bit, these rebels have taken over. We saw demonstrations in the streets of Damascus and other cities in Syria celebrating the fact that the Assad regime was coming to an end. They've been in power for, 40, 50 years there. and brutal dictatorship
since the 70s.
Since the 70s. So the rebels have been welcomed. Question is now, is it going to be any better? Because Syria has served as a pipeline for the Iranians to ship weapons into Syria and then on to the Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. Is that going to change? Big question this morning. So what is going to change? What's going to become of Assad in Moscow? One of those questioned about all of this was Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican of Arkansas, on the fall of Assad. And according to Senator Cotton, this could be good news because he believes it weakens Iran and Russia, but he says the future is cloudy. Cut number 2.
First off, it's very welcome news to the Syrian people. As you said, they've suffered under the Assad dictatorship for more than 50 years. It's also humiliating news for our adversaries, Russia and Iran, which have been propping up Assad for over a decade. Russia has 2 major bases there in Syria that they've used to help support the Houthi rebels in Yemen that have been attacking our sailors in the Red Sea. But we also have to be guarded about the future as well. I don't think we should expect democracy is naturally going to flower in Syria. We have to protect our interests, as Israel does as well. That's why the United States and Israel carried out those airstrikes over the weekend to make sure, for instance, that ISIS remnants in eastern Syria weren't taking the advantage of this period to gain more land, or that those chemical weapons or other weapons depots you mentioned weren't falling into the wrong hands.
Now, as Senator Cotton mentioned, over the weekend, in the wake of the rebels taking over, both the United States Air Force and Israeli forces went in, and they did bombing runs on weapons caches there because they're not clear as to who's going to control those because they represent a danger. Remember, Israel has a border with Syria. It has been a problem through the years. One of those commenting on that this morning was incoming hostage affairs envoy for the new Trump administration, Adam Bowler. Cut number 3.
Well, I think interesting developments here as you see Israel pushing further into Syria. They're really trying to establish 2 things: a real zone so that they can make sure that there are not more weapons and more fighters in a zone that's close to Israel. The second thing they're looking for is they're finding and destroying chemical weapons, which is interesting because everybody thought there were chemical weapons in Syria, and it turns out there are chemical weapons in Syria. The most important thing we should be thinking about right now is whether we can get Americans home. There is an American that's there. In fact, there are 4 or 5 more. I think that information is somewhat classified, but the American Austin Tice has been in Syria for 9+ years. And it would be great to get him because what's happening is that regime is collapsing. You see that Bashar went to Russia, and now you have rebels that may or may not be friends to the United States.
So there you have it. A big question mark as to whether the rebel takeover will be a positive, but both the United States and Israel taking precautions that those caches, those weapon caches that this speaker was talking about, Adam Bowler, could still pose a threat to Israel.
Now, that Austin Tice that he just mentioned, I only read here recently, he was presumed dead for a long time, wasn't he? Family still held out hope, and now the discussion is that he may very well still be alive, but he's been there for 9 years.
Yes, according to Mr. Bowler.
All right, Alex, we'll pitch it to you first, then Wesley. This is a complicated situation because some of these rebels are Al-Qaeda and ISIS, who have been enemies of the United States. Al-Qaeda was behind 9/11. And so this does get complicated because, on the other hand, I can see where the U.S., in terms of its foreign policy, would want the Assad regime to go away because they were the ones allowing Russia and Iran to funnel into the Middle East and to stir up trouble through Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen.
Yeah, it really is complicated. Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but the Assad regime there at the Syrian border, that was a threatening presence to Israel. And I've actually been to this border. This is really surreal, but 10 years ago when I was in Israel, we got taken within a few hundred yards of the Syrian border. So I'm watching news footage of a place that I walked, and in fact, there's still they think bombs buried in the ground from 1973. So we were very judicious. But I've been to this border. But the Assad regime, weren't they really propped up by Russian armaments that they had in possession, and further armaments were promised if needed? I mean, this is really a blow to Russia's muscle, allegedly, in the Middle East, isn't it, Ed?
Yeah, it is, and I think that's what Tom Cotton was saying, is that this is a humiliation. Now, Iran is increasingly being isolated, I think. I think that's because of President Trump, President-elect Trump.
Exactly.
I think countries know, I'm not trying to over-dramatize this, but the new sheriff in town, and that Iran is likely to be isolated like it was under President Trump during his administration. But this is embarrassing for Russia, because for the last decade, maybe a little bit more, they've wanted a presence in the Middle East. This goes back to the Cold War with the U.S. and NATO against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, that they had proxy regimes in the Middle East. The Soviets helped support Egypt. We helped support Israel. And when they went to war, Israel would win. That was always embarrassing for the Soviets. And now the Russians are being embarrassed too under Putin for what has happened, because they were promising to provide more munitions if they needed. Wesley, and then I want to toss another question out to you guys regarding what's been going on in Syria.
Well, I'll give you my geopolitical expertise.
Man, bring it.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah, well, I'm ready.
I agree with Tom Cotton.
Yeah.
I don't think he could have said it any better. He gave a well-balanced conservative position on it. Now, I will add to what he said, and that's that as it relates to America being involved in this, I could kind of understand why they did their airstrikes, and that's fine. But beyond that, going in and doing that and coming out, that's fine. But I don't think that we need to get involved in anything beyond that as far as a more permanent position, just because unless it has to do with affecting American a threat to America.
Yeah.
I would, but I would.
What about Israel?
That's right, or Israel, or a threat to America, because we've already tried going over there for a decade and trying to help them build a
20
democracy.
years.
Yeah, that's right, 20 years. Already tried that, so I would not do that. But my position is I couldn't have stated it any better.
Well, then let me just toss out to you three guys. I know none of us are geopolitical experts here. I certainly don't claim to be. But we do run the country. I mean, we do have an opinion that matters when we contact, our senators or our representative and let them know what we expect. So here's the headline out of the Los Angeles Times. Now, I've not had a chance to read this, but this is interesting. And the headline is this: in Syria, militias armed by the Pentagon fight those armed by the CIA. Okay, and it says the CIA, through Operation Timber Sycamore, funds ISIS in Syria. The Pentagon funds and arms al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. It deployed F-35 fighters, jets, and Reaper drones to give them air superiority against Assad-backing forces. Now, so I'll come back to you, Fred. You just tell me, and then we'll go Alex and Wesley. Admittedly, the Middle East is a mess, okay? And it is always going to be a mess, I guess.
Sharia laws, is what the governs
yes.
them. So, I mean, that tells you,
when America considers what role it plays, if this is true, this Los Angeles Times article, and I'm going to delve deeper into it when I get a chance, but if that's true, that's bizarre. When there are people in North Carolina still sleeping in tents, the Biden administration is funneling billions into Ukraine, and billions into Syria while the United States needs help. And it appears, if this is true, that those funds were going to opposite sides in a civil war. That seems bizarre to me.
Yeah, I'll answer your question directly, but we have to remember things have been complicated when it comes to America's relationship with the parties in the Middle East for a long time.
Yes.
We give money to Israel,
Yes.
but we also give money to the Palestinians in the West Bank.
True.
Who turn around and use U.S. taxpayers' money to award the families of terrorists who might be killed by Israel.
You're right.
So that's been going on. In Lebanon, we support the Lebanon government as it is.
Yeah.
But we help Israel attack Hezbollah, the
Yes.
terrorist group, which is also a political party in Lebanon.
Yes.
So let's go back to Syria. So the story out of the LA Times, in some ways, ought not to surprise us because how does that saying go? The enemy of my friend or the friend of my enemy, or how
The
does,
enemy of my enemy is my friend.
yes. It's kind of like that, in that if there are factions against the Assad regime, then they may be terrorists, but let's help them because we don't like Assad.
Yeah.
It's never nice, clean-cut lines.
It wasn't like World War II.
No.
That's
Against
why I
the
say
Nazis.
stay out of it unless it directly affects us at home.
Yeah.
But
Well, and Alex does.
Does
you
it?
know, I can see. You know, Wesley was making the point earlier, and I can see where U.S. policy, and I certainly don't agree with Biden administration, but U.S. policy might be to try to push Russia and Iran out of Syria. So it might be to our advantage in defending Israel. But what do you take? What's your perspective on what Fred just said? Which is it was an excellent point that he's making. It's never clear cut in the Middle East, except perhaps in helping to protect Israel. Oh, and let me just ask you too, before I forget, Alex, there are Christians in Syria.
Yes,
That
there are.
If Al Qaeda and ISIS, you know, I don't know what kind of government's coming, but if someone of that kind of depravity takes over, what's going to happen to the Christians in Syria who Assad left alone? Now listen,
Yeah.
he was gassing his own citizens with chemical weapons, but as far as I know, he left the Christians alone because you know what? The Christians weren't trying to overthrow his regime. So what does this say for Christians as well? Go ahead.
You know, Ed, I'm so glad you bring that up, that yes, there are Christians in Syria, always have been. You know what's interesting? Church history tells us that probably within 200 years after the resurrection of Christ, the first thoroughly Christianized nation, or the most intensely Christian, highest proportion of born-again Christians within 200 years after the life of Christ would have been Syria. So there, for 1900 plus years, there have always been Christians in Syria. By the way, this is what's so interesting, I think, about today's issues, because it's kind of organic where the conversation goes. Let me just say this. The question might be asked, why has Russia been so interested in helping Arab groups and terrorists? And I think, at least at the basis, Russia, even though it's been 30 years since the fall of communism, Russia has been intensely anti-Western. And the fundamentalist Muslims are intensely anti-Western. I'm going to be very simplistic, and Fred, Ed, Wesley, you guys can agree or disagree. What would fix everything over there is if Israel were allowed to win wars and defend itself. I mean, Israel's like the only nation in the world that is not, they can fight, they can engage in certain levels of self-defense. Israel is not allowed to win wars. And if they were allowed to exist, engage in, their self-determination like any other sovereign nation, the complexities and danger of the Middle East would be fixed, I believe, in a very short order if Israel were really allowed to defend itself.
No,
Wesley?
let me ask you this, or ask the panel: is that not Do you not feel like they are being able to this go around? Or I'm sorry, not whether they are allowed to or not, are they not already? I feel like they're doing that this go around.
No, I think Alex is saying that the world opinion was telling him to ceasefire in Gaza.
Yeah.
And is that what you're talking about, Alex?
Yeah, exactly. And now, and certainly with Trump coming to be president, regardless of what you think of Trump, I mean, it's like regarding foreign policy, there's an adult in the room now.
Yeah. And I find it fascinating. In fact, Fred and I were talking about this just before the program started. Donald Trump is just going to wind up being a generational political figure and cultural figure. And it's you just wouldn't have predicted this. I never would have before 2016. But what he did in winning the election, 2 assassination attempts, all that, clearly seems to be the hand of God, and he's uniquely gifted for this moment. I don't think he certainly can't turn our country around by himself.
Sure.
I don't mean that kind of transformational figure, but the fact that the world is already starting to come to grips with that. You see him meeting with political leaders. Everybody understands what this election means, and things are already changing.
Yeah.
What was it? Somebody said that someone's commented that.
I forgot who said it, but we talked about it this morning in the show prep meeting that someone mentioned that Trump has done more for making peace around the world as a president-elect than Harris and Biden, or Biden and Harris did in their 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. It's really extraordinary.
And there's one simple reason for that. Trump means business.
Yeah.
Trump was
president. 35 days ago, he won the election, and already, I mean, I don't take a lot of joy in this, but I mean, it's like Biden doesn't exist. No. I mean, Trump is being met by world leaders and is like the de facto acting president.
To your point, Trudeau from Canada came down after one of his tweets.
Yes.
I'd say his tweet or his post.
Yes. And the entire Mexican government is scrambling to figure out what they're going to do in the face of threats of 25% tariffs. And I think the Mexican president fired back, well, we'll do tariffs too, and then immediately had to backtrack.
Yeah, that's right.
Because our economy dwarfs those. And like we're all saying, listen, we don't need to just simply throw our weight around just to be a bully, but good grief, America has basically been a pipeline of cash around the world, and it's time to keep some of that cash at home.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the sentiment that was expressed in the election victory and not just the electoral college victory, but the popular vote victory of Trump.
Well, I think Trump in his first 4 years in office brought clarity to the idea of what is right and wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
He is not an appeaser. So that's why when he went to Paris this past weekend, all these world leaders that were there for the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral, all these leaders wanted to meet with him because they see the uncertainty in the world, and they do believe that Trump will do something with Iran, that the Biden administration would not. And everybody knows Iran is the catalyst for everything wrong that's in the Middle East right now. So they know that. And they're looking at what's going on in Ukraine. Trump on the weekend says, ceasefire. That's what has to happen. And I do believe you will see that within a few months.
Yeah, I think sooner than that.
Yeah.
Listen, I think he's going to say to Syria, whoever's in charge, listen, we don't want Iranian influence here. We don't want Russian influence here. We're going to help you build back your country. Okay, however you feel about that, folks. I think that's part of what Trump's going to say. And then he's going to say, and if we don't get it with you, we'll make sure we get it with somebody, whoever's next man up.
Yes.
All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more of today's issues. Hope you stick around.
This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
And welcome back, everybody, to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano, Fred Jackson, Alex McFarland, and Wesley Wildman, who is my right-hand man
yes,
today.
Sir. I sure
sitting
am.
in Tim Wildman's seat. It is Monday, December 9th. You're running out of time, folks, if you haven't started your Christmas shopping. But enough inducement to anxiety. Anyway, it's a great time of the year. Hope you're having a blast and enjoying Jesus in a special way this time of year. Lots of stuff going on. And, Fred, we have some breaking news.
Wow. Breaking news out of New York. And I think a lot of people will celebrate this.
Yeah, in my opinion, great news.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the story of Daniel Penny, the Marine who took down this guy on a New York subway who was acting violently. He was threatening violence against people on the subway. Daniel Penny, a young man who was on the subway, he sees the danger of this. He puts this guy in a chokehold, and the passenger that Daniel Penny brought down died eventually. And Daniel Penny was charged by Alvin Bragg's very corrupt Justice Department, Alvin Bragg being the district attorney there, charged with manslaughter, which could have sent Daniel Penny to jail for 15 years. The jury on Friday kept coming back 3 or 4 times saying, we're having questions about the instructions from the judge. On Friday afternoon, with the instruction coming or the suggestion coming from Alvin Bragg's prosecution, we're just going to drop the manslaughter charge, but we now want the jury to look at the negligence charge, which could still send Penny to prison for 4 years.
Yeah.
The breaking news is this, folks. The jury came back this morning and within moments came back with a not guilty verdict on negligence. So Daniel Penny gets to go home and gets to put this behind him. Now, there is going to be civil case. The dad of the gentleman who died,
Jordan Neely.
Yes, the dad has said he's going to bring a civil case. We'll see how that goes. But as far as the criminal case goes, it's done. The jury says we're finished. We don't think Daniel Penny did anything wrong.
Yep.
Wesley, why don't you go ahead, because you seem to have strong feelings about this, and then Alex, jump in.
I'm just thankful that we've seen cases like this when you got really deep blue roots. You got a deep blue judge in a deep blue city, and someone does something right, and somehow or another they get accused of some form of racism or some form of, in this case, just what he was accused of legally, the accusation of manslaughter.
The prosecutor kept calling Daniel Penny the white guy. The white guy.
Yeah, that type of stuff. And you see, in years past, we've seen over and over again where we know how this is going to play out.
Right.
They're not going to get a fair trial. So I'm thankful to see that he's been given a fair trial when all the evidence was presented. That the jurists came back and said, "Look, he's innocent." Just to remind y'all, this is a former Marine who stood up for multiple people and put
of different races.
Yeah, multiple different races, different ethnicities, different genders. There's only 2 genders,
right?
Male and female. But he stood up and did something courageous, and we need more of this. Over the last 20 or 30 years, we've seen a society both in entertainment and education and politics that has pretty much laid the path to nobody get involved because there's a chance. I mean, think about defunding the police, right? This idea of just staying out of it at the expense of not ruining your life, even doing what's right. Because, and I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent
Sure,
here,
it's all right.
But a little bit of a tangent for me would be this goes back to just kids in school, the no tolerant policy. No matter what, they don't consider the fact that if somebody punches you and you defend yourself, all of a sudden they're both equal and they both get kicked out of school. That type, I'm bringing this all the way back to home now, but that kind of teaching, it devolves into, well, the good guys don't want to take a chance of ruining their career
Right.
or their life, but then the bad guys, they don't care. They've been in and out of prison anyways.
Because they're bad guys.
Because they're bad guys.
Yeah.
And so you've built a society over the last 20, 30 years of good guys essentially not wanting to get involved. Well, in this case, he did, and he took a risk, and he potentially saved many people because Neely, is it Jordan Neely?
Jordan Neely.
Jordan Neely was a gentleman who was threatening the lives of other people. In fact, if he had a weapon of any kind, he probably would have killed someone. And one other thing, Alex, and I want you to hop in here.
Yeah.
Also, this happened during the time, if you remember, of people in New York City being pushed into trains.
Yes.
You remember this?
Yeah.
So that was also during that same timeline. Now, I don't remember the window of that, but they've had some instances in New York City of people being pushed by evil people into trains.
Yeah.
This is at a train station.
Yeah.
And this guy's threatening to kill people.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, well, and the people that were on the train or the subway, whatever it was, said they felt like they were going to get killed.
Yes.
When Jordan Neely began to, he threw down his jacket, he began to threaten and yell, and before Daniel Penny intervened, the people said they felt like they were going to die. Now, I'm not a legal scholar, I'm not an attorney, but all my life I've heard about Good Samaritan laws.
Yeah.
And a subset of Good Samaritan laws is a legal term called duty to rescue. And so, like you said, Wesley, this is deep blue territory. And I think it's very telling that over and over Daniel Penny was referred to his race, a white guy. So, Ed, let me ask you guys this. Don't you think, and of course this is purely speculative, but had he not been Caucasian, I don't think there would have been a conviction or the desire to go after him for a homicide. I think he was trying to protect people. I think he should have been protected under the broad umbrella of Good Samaritan laws. I think he was made an example of because he was white.
Well, and I think that's exactly right, and that goes to the heart of the matter because the assistant district attorney who is prosecuting Daniel Penny was a white woman.
Yeah.
Okay, this wasn't a black prosecutor, because the key is not necessarily the race of the prosecutor; it's the ideology driving what's happening in New York City.
Right.
This is a Soros-infested district attorney's office that is only looking to score points on the DEI scale or the woke scale. This is why they were going to prosecute the bodega owner a couple of years ago. Remember, who defended himself with a knife and the assailant died? They were going to prosecute the bodega owner until it went national, the news, and the embarrassment level went off the charts. So the tossing aside, we saw this against Donald Trump, the tossing aside of legal precedent and laws in favor of, in this case with Daniel Penny, ideological prosecutions was made no clearer than with the district attorney withdrawing count one, which was the manslaughter charge, in favor of the negligence charge, because they figured that was the way to get Daniel Penny some prison time, because they didn't care about what's right here. They cared about getting their, I'm sorry to use this language, their scalp, their woke scalp. And what I've been reading is that is considered the risk of a coercive verdict or compromised verdict, because the judge is weighing and putting his thumb on the scale, telling the jury to go back and consider the negligence charge, because we got to get something on this guy. And I'm glad the whole lot of them failed. Go ahead, Wesley.
Do y'all think, Fred, is it a bit of a stretch to feel like this is one more win in the direction of doing away with this constant seeing things through the lens of skin color? You know what I mean? Because they emphasize that a lot, and anybody in their own mind can look at this and go, this, regardless of whether he was found guilty or not of manslaughter, it had absolutely nothing to do with either one of their skin colors.
No. And I understand, I believe the jury was a mixed race jury. But you know what? Stuff has happened over the last couple of years in New York.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
New Yorkers are upset whether they have black skin or white skin or brown skin.
That's right.
They're upset with the violence. They're scared to walk down the street at
right.
certain times of the day.
Yeah,
All times now.
Yeah, and so these people are sitting
United
there.
Health.
They've seen the story.
Yeah.
Daniel Penny, after this occurred, was questioned by police. He went to the police headquarters, was questioned because he didn't think he did anything wrong.
Right.
He was just helping these people who were being threatened by Mr. Neely.
Yeah.
And who was still alive when the cops got there?
He was still alive.
He was still alive, and they didn't perform CPR on him.
No, because they were afraid to get whatever he had.
Yeah. So this whole if we're gonna discuss anything, which I can kind of understand their position during the COVID and all that kind of stuff, and they're trying to look after themselves. But on the other hand, if we're gonna have a discussion about anything, what about the paramedics that showed up and didn't perform CPR?
Right.
So,
I would say, Alex, that if this had been a subway car full of white people and Daniel Penny had choked out a single young black man, I would say, okay, maybe there's something racial here. Okay, but it was a subway car full of
and he had
all kinds of people.
He had no history of this either.
And he had no history of this. Jordan Neely had a history. He had a long rap sheet.
And
that's
a good point.
All of the mixed race witnesses, the people on the subway car, they said we were scared to death. This young man saved us.
Yeah.
So I think to Fred's point in answering the question Wesley raised, I think New Yorkers are waking up to what woke district attorneys are going to get you, which is chaos, and they're all in this together.
Yeah.
That's what New York City's learning.
Yes.
Well, I know this is part of the big backdrop, but the way that Marxism is imposed on a culture, and this goes back to Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals and Karl Marx's playbook as well, create disorder, destabilize a country, and in the disorder, they can introduce new order, which is a woke, progressive, Marxist order. And, I think they wanted to make Jordan Neely a martyr, much like George Floyd was depicted as. But, this is a win for the rule of law. And, other than maybe California cities, I think not only New York, fellas, but all across America, the big urban areas that have just become dangerous, nearly unlivable, I think people are tired of it. They want the rule of law upheld. They want some semblance of order restored. Now, I'm not saying California is there yet. Maybe they will get there. But, Minneapolis, Atlanta, other cities, they want the lawlessness to stop.
Well, and let me tell you why the Democratic Party, let's set aside the results of this past November election. Mm. The Democratic Party is facing some serious issues because of this issue. So let's take a trip down memory lane to the 1960s. And the Democratic Party, like this Democratic Party, this is history repeating itself, became known for being soft on crime. Mm-hmm. This is what catapulted Richard Nixon into the White House over a Democrat who, although it wasn't the incumbent, Lyndon Baines Johnson, it was a very popular Hubert Humphrey. I almost said Hoover. Hubert Humphrey. Because the Democratic Party in both 68 and 72 became known as being soft on communists and soft on crime.
Yeah.
And in 1968, American cities were burning. A lot of people don't remember this or don't know this, but in an 18-month period in the early 70s, because of what started in the 1968, there were 2,500 bombings in this country over an 18-month period between 1972 and 1973. Americans were afraid. And when you're afraid, You drop all the polite disagreements about guns or butter, and you say, we want somebody to protect us.
Yeah.
And the Democratic Party of 2024 is staring down into the abyss at the same kind of reputation with American voters. And if they're not careful, if they continue to embrace this woke garbage in the inner cities, they're going to be in for another 4-8-year losing streak. And I say, good riddance.
Yeah. Did you see over the weekend, and I'm not going to use the language he used, but Steve Shale, the Democrat strategist who made some rather scathing assessments, and again, I'm not going to use the language, but he basically said that, look, the brand, the Democrat Party brand is down the drain in the opinions of American people.
I don't disagree with that. Hey, let's hang on. Fred, go ahead. You said you get some breaking news.
Fox is reporting at this hour the man matching the description of the gunman who shot the United Health CEO last week has been taken into custody in Pennsylvania. It's been an extensive manhunt since that shooting outside that hotel in Manhattan last week of Mr. Thompson, the CEO of United Health. They've been looking for this guy. They knew he had left New York. But right now, Fox News is reporting that a man matching the description of that shooter has been taken into custody in Pennsylvania. More breaking news.
Yeah, so
it's good news. Good news Monday.
It's good news Monday. If this is the guy, and now I'm just checking quickly here on CNN. I don't see it, but this is what Fox is saying, and it's a man matching the description. But over the weekend, there were a lot of.
We have a lead.
What's that?
We have a lead at minimum.
Yes. Yeah. There was a lot of talk on X and other social media platforms that this guy had gotten away.
Yes.
Because he had slipped into Central Park where there are no cameras, and you can change your outfit. You can, and then you can exit anywhere you want, even where there's no cameras. And there were people saying he's left the state. Well, Pennsylvania is out of the state. But I'll tell you, it's increasingly difficult. Listen, if you're trying to plan the perfect crime, okay, I'm advising you don't do it because there are cameras everywhere. Go ahead, Fred.
I tell you, it was really interesting you mentioned that because last week in the midst of this story, an investigator was interviewed by Fox, and he said the fatal error that this suspect made, he was staying at a hostel, and he was flirting with the desk clerk, and he took his mask down.
Oh, I thought that was at the Starbucks.
Well, maybe both.
Okay.
Maybe both. But they said the facial recognition software that authorities have now, he said that was the fatal error. Because
that was enough?
That was enough. The facial recognition was enough. Plus,
they got us all mapped out.
He left a coffee cup or something behind at the Starbucks.
Yeah.
They took his DNA from there. So there are tools today, plus the myriad of cameras all over New York City.
Yeah.
They said it was just a matter of time. In fact, when I came into work around 6 this morning, there was word that the arrest was within hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I think we're all squeamish at the amount of surveillance that goes on in modern societies because of the possibility. Wesley, I'll toss to you, and then Alex. The possibility of the abuse of it by
and has been abused.
It has been abused by strong, powerful, centralized governments. But the flip side, like any technology, the flip side is it comes in handy when you need it.
Well, I'll add to that. Well, I have a lot of things that bother me about the government.
Yes.
Being, having all the cameras and all that kind of stuff. However, the counter to that, in my opinion, with something that everyday citizens can control is have their own. So that's why you have a lot of people that have their own. So you have private companies that have their own security system.
Yeah.
So you can say, well, yours show this, well, mine shows that,
Yeah.
and we can kind of lay it out. A lot more people nowadays have the Ring cameras or cameras at their house, and so citizens themselves are just as concerned about the government having all the cameras from their angles, their positions. So we have our own now. When you got a lot of people videoing nowadays, I don't. As much as I would like to talk about that and share my opinion, I don't. There's nothing we can do about that. But as far as at this point about what the government does, but to your point, there are situations like this that it can help you.
Alex, I want you to address the surveillance issue, but I also want to toss in here. Over the weekend, I noticed on social media, and folks, I'm not addicted to it. I keep up with it because of my job.
Sure.
So it's actually kind of depressing.
And
to
hockey.
Well, that's for me.
Oh, okay.
That's not for AFA. But I was very. I was kind of surprised. I'm not naive. I was kind of surprised at the number of leftists who were supportive of the killing of this CEO. I don't know if any of you have been seeing any of this. They were basically applauding this killer because they had bad experiences with their health insurance. I was pretty shocked to see people being supportive of that kind of murder.
Yeah. Well, I used the word a few moments ago, lawlessness. I don't know, Wesley, you might can help me out. I've got your dad's latest newsletter, and it was talking about the number of college students that believed it was okay to cheat in an election if it was to support, quote, the right candidate by ideology. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I had read even medical doctors that had posted things on social media that, they were glad that this United Healthcare CEO had been shot. Let me say this, even if I disagree with insurance claim denials and things like that, we would never condone moral wrong, violence, murder to correct some other societal wrong. So if this person is the killer and if he has been apprehended, that's a good thing. It's always good for the law to be upheld. But let me talk about surveillance for just a minute. I was on the Hamilton Corner about a month ago. I can't remember the guy's name, but I had a guest on about the global surveillance state that we have become. And frankly, guys, I think that the rise of technology, even though it can be good, I really do think the wiring of the planet, shall we say, has become part of the setting of the stage for the end times. Someday, we don't know when, but the Antichrist and his regime will control the world as a global police state. Now listen to this. The guest I had on the Hamilton Corner was talking about in China, because there's facial recognition software like was used in the apprehension of this suspect. But not only does it look at your face and the structure of your, facial characteristics, software even looks at your walk, your gait. Yeah. And they said in China now, think about this, 1.4 billion people in China. They say in China, any one of those people could be looked at on camera and identified, and their entire history in 22 seconds or less.
Wow. This is AI driven?
Yeah, yes. So to what you said a moment ago, not that anybody listening would do this, but if you're planning the perfect crime, in the 21st century, you won't get away. Don't do it. And of course, we know the Lord is watching. We should live right, do right. Because
you certainly won't get away with what you're doing.
The eyes of the Lord are watching. So it's time to have our house in order and live right, isn't it?
Amen. Well, I just think it's, and Fred, we'll come right back to you here. The irony of this young man, because for all intents and purposes, it seems like a younger guy who shot this CEO. He's opposed to big corporations, United Healthcare, and what's one of the first things he does? He goes to Starbucks, another big corporation. Okay, I just listen. I know it's no comparison to what he did, whoever this guy is. I just think it's bizarre. These people seem to be off their rocker. Yeah. You hate big corporations or you don't? Anyway, go ahead, Fred.
No, I'm just go back to the Daniel Penny story for a second. Out front, there are protesters, and I'm not sure if there's going to be violence over the acquittal of Daniel Penny, but the uprising has already started there in New York City. There's a news conference going on with a community group there. So be praying for Daniel Penny. His difficulties are not over yet.
Yep.
Be praying for him.
And be praying for New York City.
Yes.
Because if there are riots planned, and there are people who make a living
Be
off that
encouraged
kind of
too
thing.
that Daniel Penny was acquitted, and we need more Daniel Pennies out there
Yeah.
that are willing to stand up.
All right, folks, we are going to take a 5-minute break for news. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. When we come back, this is Ed, Wesley, Dr. Alex McFarland, Steve Jordahl will be in the house, and we'll be talking some more about what's going on both here and abroad in a Christian perspective. Hope you'll join us.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back, folks. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. Lord willing. I always try to throw that in, Lord willing, like Chris Woodward. He'll be back here in the captain's chair tomorrow. I'm joined by Wesley Wildman, Dr. Alex McFarland, and now Steve Jordahl. Steve Jordahl joins us.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning to you, sir.
Ed.
What's that?
Paisley Jordahl.
Steve Paisley Jordahl.
Yeah.
You know, that really is Tim's thing.
Okay, that's fair.
I never really got into it, but Tim likes it. And now, Steve, you are Steve Paisley
Okay, so you
Jordahl.
didn't forget you were just showing respect for Dad. That's his thing.
It's his
okay.
thing.
All right.
And he usually bringing us back. But now there are folks who, that's when they come to visit, they
Yeah.
want to see Steve Paisley
They
Jordahl.
do. I know it's taken on a life of its own.
Yes. I tell you. Hey, be thankful. Steve Paisley Jordahl is a lot better than Eddie Spaghetti. That took on
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that took on a life of its own for
All right, hold on. Say that
huge
again. Ed
chunk of my life. Eddie Spaghetti with the meatball eyes.
Gee, I'm writing that down.
Put them in the oven and you get French fries, and that never made a lick of sense to me. How you get French fries
Out of
out of
spaghetti.
meatball eyes. Anyway, folks, if you want good radio, that wasn't it.
No, I told you.
But welcome to the program anyway.
Well, we behaved the first hour, and I told you that as well as that first hour went, the second half, or the last half hour, I don't know. We may cut up a good
We get
bit.
a little loosey-goosey when Steve comes in because he does have some offbeat stories.
Usually.
But anyway, you do have a sad story. We're going to get to that in a second. But let's start off with what you have at the top.
Yeah, I heard you guys were celebrating Good News Monday, and let me continue this. It's not completely good news because we don't have a resolution to this yet, but Donald Trump's nominees are for his cabinet are now on the Hill. They're talking to senators, and among them is Pete Hegseth. You may know as the former co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, a highly decorated soldier, and somebody that Donald Trump is backing 100%. Well, there are those in the Democrat Party that really do not want to see him. He looks to cleanse the military of all woke stuff. That's one of the things he said he's going to do. There's going to be no more transgender soldiers.
Right.
Anyway, so they're bringing their guns to bear, and there's been a whole lot of accusations of sexual impropriety, of drinking, of all this kind of stuff. Well, so Pete Hegseth was making his rounds on Capitol Hill to visit the senators, and he was stopped by a bunch of the media who wanted to ask him about all of this. And this is what he had to say. Cut 4.
Oh, we've had great conversations about who I am and what I believe, and frankly, the man I am today, because of my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and my incredible wife, Jenny, right here. I'm a different man than I was years ago, and that's a redemption story that I think a lot of Americans appreciate, and I know from fellow vets that I've spent time with, they resonate with that as well. You fight, you go do tough things in tough places on behalf of your country, And sometimes that changes you a little bit. And by the grace of God and my Lord and Savior, I had an opportunity to come on up out of it and do great things with great veterans organizations that fought for vets, that fought for reform at the VA and for war fighters, and at the Fox News Channel to advocate for those very same causes. And I'm proud of what I fought for. I'm not going to back down from them one bit. I will answer all of these senators' questions, but this will not be a process tried in the media. I don't answer to anyone in this group. None of you. Not to that camera at all. I answer to President Trump, who received 76 million votes on behalf and a mandate for change. I answer to the 100 senators who are part of this process and those in the committee. And I answer to my Lord and Savior and my wife and my family. I'm proud to be here. And as long as Donald Trump wants me in this fight, I'm going to be standing right here in this fight, fighting to bring our Pentagon back to what it needs to be.
I don't think that Marine is going to give up easily.
Yeah, and he did. It was a little bit longer clip. He did talk about the lethality of the military, and that was its main objective. Alex, I'll say this. I have no idea whether Pete Hegseth is going to be confirmed by the Senate, but that's a pretty good message.
In response to
Yeah,
the attacks that he's been taken on by the media.
yeah, I think that's a pretty good response and a direction to take in answering those charges. You know, I hadn't really thought about when these charges first came out about years ago, some of the things that he's been accused of doing.
And some of them are true.
Yeah, he's not denying that
Right.
he came back from war and was not a good. I hadn't tied the wartime experience to
PTSD.
perhaps some of his actions, but that's I guess a legitimate way of trying to frame these issues and take responsibility for it and say, listen, I'm changed. I'm not that man.
Can I just clear something up? You're not saying his actions were legitimate.
No.
That there's an excuse for them.
Right. No, that's a good point. But I hadn't thought about the fact that I having never served in the military, never been combat, I don't know how that changes a person. And so Alex, as a Christian, he is saying I have a right to change.
Sure.
And I don't have to like what I was, but I'm presenting what I am.
Yeah, and isn't it refreshing to hear an unambiguous word from a leader and a public figure? You know, I think about totally different, but Karine Jean-Pierre, everything is just fluid, in the gray, ambiguous.
Yes.
AOC and her word salads. Here is just crystal clear forthrightness. He said, look, there are things I'm not proud of, but I'm a changed person. And I loved it. I was like, yes. He was saying, look, I don't answer to you guys. I answer to my employer, my leader, and the Lord Jesus Christ. There it is.
Yeah.
Isn't it nice? Forthrightness.
Yes.
And what did he call it? A redemption story? Something like that.
Yeah, he called it a redemption story. That's the language he used. He also mentioned that he thanked his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ as a result of the direct correlation to his changes.
Yes.
And also I want to add a little more context, because I was when all this stuff was coming out, day after day, I was one of those, okay, I got to take a step back because you're making this really hard for me to defend.
Yeah.
However, more context here just to add to and kind of support Pete Hegseth and all the allegations and all the things that he did 7 years ago. Okay,
Yes.
So I just looked it up just to confirm. I read this the other day, but wanted to make sure I read that correctly. So his redemption story started in 2018. We're in 2024 now, so that's 6+ years later.
Yeah.
And so now that doesn't mean somebody can't have a moral setback or make or above failure or anything like as a Christian.
Right.
However, since he has professed to be a Christian and making change and being redeemed, he's 6 years removed from going on 7 years removed from the most harsh allegations and things that he has done, like committing adultery and things like that as well.
Right.
So
drinking.
drinking. So my point would be that if this were to happen yesterday and he became a changed man yesterday, then you would like to see, if you're going to elect him in office, you'd like to see a little bit more of fruit You see what I'm saying?
Right,
Like to see a little
right.
bit more of some more evidence. But we're 7 years removed from this.
Yes.
And he got 7 years. There's nothing anything that he's been accused of that would be problematic for the Christian worldview, potentially. Even though there's also a discussion to be had, can he do the job?
Right.
Right. But both things are clear. For me personally, both things have cleared the air. It's a redemption story, and I personally think he's going to do a great job too.
Well, and like I said when I first made my first comment, I don't know whether he's going to be confirmed, but he is working hard to try to gain the trust of a sufficient number of senators. And when he said 50, he was talking about the likelihood of needing all 50 Republicans. Hopefully some Democrats will go bipartisan on some of these and make it not nearly so close. You never know. So he's got to have at least those 50. But anyway, it was a good news story because he does honor Jesus. And like you said, Wesley, it helps, apart from whether he can do the job, it helps me personally knowing that as far as we know, over the last 7 years, he has tried to live as a Christian.
There you go.
And has changed his life.
Yep.
Steve, anything else to add to that, or?
No, a lot of people on the Hill are willing to go to the mat for this guy.
Yeah.
I've heard people say that this is the hill to die on for Donald Trump because they've already picked off Matt Gaetz.
Yeah.
If they pick him off, then
Joni Ernst.
Joni Ernst is next. Whoever is.
I see.
They're just going to go one after the other of his
right.
picks and roll them up.
And that wouldn't be good for the Republican Party.
No.
And it's not good for the nation to make it seem
right.
like politics is trying to kneecap the guy coming in, especially with all the insecurity and chaos in the world. So, all right. Now we got to get to a very serious story. So, folks, we do want to give a parental warning on this story. This is an egregious and evil act we're going to discuss. So if you have little ones, you may want to tune down the radio for the next few minutes before we move on. But go ahead, Steve, with this very sad story.
Last week on Wednesday, a gentleman named Glenn Litton walked into a kindergarten, an elementary school in Oroville, California. Oroville's about 60 miles north of Sacramento in the Central Valley. And told them he wanted to enroll a child in their school. They took him on a tour of the school, walked him out to the parking lot, and as he was walking out to the parking lot, he took a left-hand turn, drew a gun out of his jacket, and shot 2 kindergarten students.
Now, there was a reason why.
Yeah, their
this
names
guy
were
did
Roman Mendez, who was 6, and Elias Wolford, who was 5. This is what he said. Now, this statement that he made, this is the reading from his writings, will tell you that there are some mental issues with this guy. By the way, he turned the gun on himself immediately thereafter and ended his own life. This is what he wrote. Countermeasures involving child executions has now been imposed at the Seventh-day Adventist School in California, United States, by the International Alliance. Lieutenant Glenn Litton of the Alliance carried out the countermeasures in necessitated response to America's involvement in genocide and the oppression of Palestinians, along with attacks towards Yemen. So a little convoluted some mental issues there. But you have heard nothing about this. Did you even know about this, Alex? Had you even heard about this?
I had not heard about this story. Well, no, I did hear about 2 children getting killed, but I didn't make the connection till just now.
They were not killed. They are
in critical condition now.
And improving, actually. I just read this morning that they're improving.
Praise
but yes.
God.
And why? Because it's a Christian school that's targeted, and they're all white individuals. That's my take on why you haven't heard a thing about it.
Well, now it is on some of the local news, ABC 7 Los Angeles, local CBS News. You're talking about the national news.
I mean,
it's not,
school shootings get a lot of play. We
Yes.
stop presses when you hear of a school shooting.
especially if it's a conservative. If it's a conservative
that's doing the shooting,
you're going to hear about it. Alex, let me just say this. Let me just ask you this one thing, and then we'll move on, because this is just, like I said, this is just a heartbreaking story. Thank the Lord that these children are improving.
Yeah.
But even though this gentleman was certainly mentally ill, there is an element of evil here that, as a increasingly secularized society, we still seem unwilling to mention. A spiritual evil. It's not just in the mind. This is a spiritual thing that afflicts the heart as well, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And, I don't like it when they excuse it completely to mental illness, because, look, he said he was checking out this school for a fictitious grandson. I mean, he was scheming and he was planning. Do you know, when I've been on a number of shows in the aftermath of these school shootings, and I was on a show, I think it was with Geraldo Rivera some years ago, in the aftermath of one of the school shootings. I'm sad to say I don't even remember which one. And Geraldo Rivera said, well, this person was insane. And I said, I disagree. I mean, killers very often are coldly logical. And I think we need to not only be a country that talks about there are objective moral truths and people are to be held accountable for their actions, but violence and murder is not, it can be mental illness, but it can also be just the fact that we have a propensity for sin and wickedness. And many people perpetrate wicked, evil deeds, not because they're crazy, but they're fallen, they're sinful. The Bible uses terms like reprobate, and they know the right, but they choose to do the wrong. I think we need to talk about human nature and human capacity for overt evil.
The reason, Alex, I could not agree with you more, and I've been concerned about this, but I haven't really thought through it and articulate it in a long extent. So I'll try to be careful here, because I don't want to dismiss those that do have some form of schizophrenia or that. However, I do believe, Alex, being careful here, is that we have as a society over the last couple of years, last decade, have gone really quick to the word mental illness to define whatever somebody's doing that's wrong. And then when you go to mental illness, again, you save me here if I go too far. If you go there too quickly without considering what you just said, Alex, then you find yourself getting half of America being sympathetic because they couldn't help it.
Yes.
Do you see the problem here?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why I think that Mayor Adams, while I appreciate there are some things that he said recently from New York, the mayor, I do think that there are some things that I'm grateful for that were helpful for our side. However, I believe a lot of it's been disingenuous because he goes straight to mental illness for other things as well. And I believe that's setting the stage for they can't help it.
Yeah.
When I think, like Alex said, in many cases, it's premeditated.
If you're going to reject God and the Bible as the foundation of your culture, you have to go with a materialistic explanation for everything.
Yeah,
and mental illness is the materialistic explanation. I'm in agreement. I think we're all in agreement here. If somebody's howling at the moon, okay, dressed in only their slippers and hair curlers, okay, you could be talking about some serious mental illness there. Nervous breakdown, whatever we used to call it when I was growing up. Oh, the poor person had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's real. And I'm not mocking that. I'm saying we did dump an awful lot into that basket.
The last five years or so.
Oh, I'm talking about when I was growing up.
Oh, okay.
We would throw everything into that basket.
Oh, I'm tracking with you.
It was a nervous breakdown.
Well, it's been switched now. It's mental illness.
Yeah, and so now what you have is what is actually mental illness, like you mentioned, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever now, where people are hearing voices. Some of that may be demonic. I don't know. And if you're gonna jettison a biblical worldview,
Yeah,
you're
sure.
gonna misidentify what's underneath a lot of this. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. Do you know in mental health literature, there is increasingly, and I'm talking about the highest levels of serious scholarship, not Christian necessarily, but psychiatrists talk about demon possession. And I've read journal articles, guys, where they'll say, there is a spiritual component. We have no other explanation. And they're not necessarily affirming the reality of the supernatural, but they're saying, look, there's no other explanation other than the demonic. And so, we don't want to be, morbidly interested in this kind of stuff. But it is a world of objective good and objective evil. And, remember the Covenant Christian School shooting? There was Aiden Hale, who was a 28-year-old transgender.
Yes.
And I was on a show with that, and somebody was like, well, this poor soul was, mentally ill. No, they were very rational.
Yes.
I mean, it was planned to the nth degree. And let's just be honest. We human beings, valuable, made in God's image, but yet humans have a sin nature, and only through the redemptive act of Jesus Christ can we be forgiven of sin and really put on the pathway toward righteousness.
Yeah.
And so we're a country, and maybe the 22% uptick in Bible sales portends a return to rationality. But we need our not only parents, pastors, and leaders, but educators and everybody. We need to say, look, sin exists, and we need to be delivered from it.
All right, Wesley, AFA is trying to help the church develop a Christian worldview. How are we doing that? We do it on all our aspects, but there's something in particular that we're encouraging people to take a look at.
Activate Summit 2025, Activate Summit 2025. You can go to activate.afa.net, activate.afa.net. Coming up this summer, this upcoming summer, 2025, June 12th through the 14th, we're having our annual conference. We previously had done Marriage Family Life Conference. We took a year off. We're coming back with an Activate Summit 2025. And the subtitle is Biblical Bedrock, Building on the Authority of Scripture. And we'll have several of our show hosts and others outside that will participate in that. And your families included. Will have classes that will be simultaneous with as we have done with Marriage Family Life. As the adults are having their conference, the children will be having a conference similar that fits their age of learning. And so really looking forward to that. You can go to afa.net to find out more about that.
All right, we're running out of time,
Let me
Steve.
just say this. Donald Trump may have been spending too much time with Elon Musk. You know how Elon Musk, everything he does, he sees something, he goes, he's got rockets, he's got tunnels, he's got electric cars, he's got PayPal, he's got like a dozen things, a variety of things he's done. He's going to be starting a school.
He's got X.
He's got X. Yeah. Well, Donald Trump, now we find out, has released a new perfume and cologne. This is real, folks.
This is real.
Not
This
Babylon
is
B.
No.
Okay.
It's called Fight, Fight, Fight.
I'm fact checking you right now.
I don't know what it smells like, but he says that it's called Fight, Fight, Fight because they represent winning. And he put out a picture of him at Notre Dame, the reopening of the cathedral, sitting next to Dr. Jill Biden, who's smiling at him. And the tagline on the commercial goes, "A fragrance your enemies can't resist."
Listen,
now perfume or not cologne, right?
Both.
Okay,
Both.
gotcha.
Listen, that's going to be if that's a real thing, and you're saying this is real.
I'm saying
okay, it's real.
It's real. That's just genius. I'm just going to say, Donald Trump continues to kill it. I mean, just by all these ideas, and that might have been Elon Musk's idea to the point you were making. Now, I'm sure he's not going to be able to use Jill Biden's picture on the bottle of cologne or perfume, but that was sheer genius, using that picture and saying a fragrance your enemies can't resist, because she sure enough was smiling at him.
She's a public figure.
Listen, I don't know how much the cologne costs, but if it's not too expensive,
For $200 for women.
oh,
$200.
it's too. It's probably going to be too much for
Maybe
me.
a big bottle.
Yeah.
Maybe a year's
Well-
worth. And then you just start adding it
Doubt it.
up. You know?
Yeah. No,
He said, "I
no one
doubt
in my
that."
household's worth that. But, anyway, folks, Alex, thank you, brother. And
God bless you.
folks, thank you for listening. More great programming directly ahead. You're listening to American Family Radio.